Ahoy everyone, Tightrope here, and today we're taking a look at the new maps and about half of the general balance changes that they made in patch 2.5 for Company of Heroes 3 because there are a huge number of changes in this patch, lots and lots of big game system updates. Here we have the new 1v1 map called Butcher and Bolt. It's got a pretty standard amount of fuel, 42 total, quite a lot of munitions actually at 92, and 4 strategic points for some cutoff play. I expect at the start of the match, you're probably going to come out with your first capturing unit to the top side because you've got quite a lot of safe resources in the corner. But where you go from there is a bit of a mystery to me because you've got like a cutoff here, going for these middle fuels, connecting to this. It's like right in the middle as well, can be quite easy to harass. So yeah, you got like a +8, pretty safe, but from there, feels like the fuel in the middle going to be pretty hotly contested. So let's have a look around the map. So base is quite open. Like you got these cliffs acting as some blockers, but quite a lot of like vision still, especially for you as the defender. Having a look at like MG placement. Pretty well covered, but you know, once you build your base structures out here, it's maybe going to block some of the machine guns. Quite a lot of cover. Kind of got a night theme. Does it feel to you guys like 1v1 gets quite a lot of night maps? I don't know. I feel like we get quite a lot of the dark maps. Is it just me? More of a problem for me as well because I turn my brightness down to 30%, which I think makes the game look better in most of the daytime scenarios, but sometimes in the night can make them look a bit too dark. That's my feeling on it at least. Okay, so we've got a bit of an urban area here, but a few of these you cannot actually get into. Interesting, like these cutoffs as well. You can see there's quite a lot of heavy cover next to them. So I could imagine if the opponent just like marches down here, cuts you off, and then jumps behind cover, it's going to be pretty hard to push back onto your cutoffs, these ones in the middle of the map. The other ones, maybe not as important of a cutoff, but they've also got some heavy cover beside them. There's one thing I wanted to know, because I'm just a lowly 1v1 player. I've never actually used one of these. Well, maybe I have in one of my like 4v4 challenges, but what are these air control tower type buildings like? Looks like they've got a blind spot on them. Can you shoot out of those like vents on the back? No, so there's a blind spot on the back of this. Can't shoot through those. Maybe 2 window positions out the side. Three out the front? Really? Not 4? Oh, if you get really close to the building, you got some blind spots. Maybe not. That was a bit weird. Alright, well yeah, that's just a building I haven't encountered before in 1v1, so had to have a look around that. I like some of these little sheds as well. And we have a new 3v3 map called Across the Savio. For fuel, it has 46 total, so in the middle of things. 82 munitions, which is not that high for a team game, and 4 strategic points. Looking at the layout, the strategic points are quite far back as well, so maybe not very useful as cutoffs, but maybe good for like air and sea mid-tent kind of play. And for the rest of the points, it feels like a lot of other team games have a lot more low points, so you have a lot more capping to do, whereas on this, the resources are higher value, more density. So probably going to be less capping to do on this map compared to some of the other 3v3s. Now let's have a look around the map, and once you start to have a look around the map, it will be immediately familiar to those of you who played Code 2, and this used to be called Across the Rhine, which was also available in 3v3, but 2v2 for a lot of its history as well. It was a 2v2 map, but mainly 3v3 towards the end of the life cycle. So yeah, we've got these strong garrisons. Looks like a pretty faithful reconstruction. This used to be like a smaller lower building. This one's got a little bit of elevation. Gonna get some window bonuses maybe out of the top floor. But yeah, it looks like a very faithful recreation of Across the Rhine. But with a night theme. And now it's a river out here, right? Rather than the sea. Is that what the Savio is? I don't even know. But yeah, if you're a COH3 3 player, this will be immediately familiar to you. And I think it was a pretty good map. And, you know, in terms of 3v3s I cast on COH2, this one seemed to produce a lot of the best games. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Relic have also made changes to the lobby system. You can see that now both teams are on the left-hand side. Used to be one team out on the right. The map is now larger here in the middle, and the game conditions are out here on the right, or the game options. They used to be squished underneath the map. I do quite like having the map being larger because it kind of makes it easier to pick out what spawn is where or which side you're spawning on based on the details on the map. So I do quite like that, but I did also think it was quite clear having one team on either side, and you don't really need to have the game options this large. They're not that important for most matches. They just look very detailed when I got cheat commands mod running. They've also made some other changes. Now you can very quickly change your battle groups. You can just like change them here. You don't have to go into that more detailed menu, but you still have the option to go to that detailed menu if you want. Come in here and look things up. You just no longer have to, so quicker to change your battle groups, which is nice. Though they didn't do the same for factions, which is a little bit strange. Also, you may have seen empty slot. So now you can set the AI to only have one battle group if you want to practice against one battle group specifically against the AI. So nice for you comp stompers. The patch notes also mentioned they changed something about sub-selecting units with tab, which I found quite confusing. I don't understand what the change was. Maybe one of you guys can explain it to me in the comments. But I was having a bit of a play around and I found this maybe problem. You see at the moment, if I select the garrison, press tab, goes to this guy, press tab again, goes to this guy, tab, the garrison as a whole, if you want to like right click to target something specifically. So I'm going to jump the first guy out, jump him back in. Now I'm going to reselect the building and then I'm going to hit tab and it goes to the second unit. But the second unit's been in the garrison for the longest and the flamethrower unit got priority in the slot 1. So there's something wrong going on there because I think whoever's been in the garrison the longest should always be in the 1 position. And if you select a garrison and press tab once, it should always go to the unit that's in the first position on the UI down here. So there's been a muck up here somewhere. Also, one thing I'd like to see changed around this kind of area is at the moment this half track has engine damage, but you can't really tell because it's pretty much blocked by the unit inside the transport. So they need to do something about repositioning the combat status away from, or maybe repositioning the garrison units away from combat status because it's just no good having that blocked. There have been a few pathfinding changes to vehicles. Apparently previously vehicles would have a preference for going in reverse. So if you're going at full speed in reverse like this and you gave a command maybe like out to the side but in front, instead of doing like it does here, stopping and then driving the head on, try and maintain the momentum, kind of swing around and go there in reverse. So that is gone now, which I think will be good, especially on maybe like the ultralights that go quite quickly in reverse. Speaking of reverse, I felt like it was pretty common for some vehicles to maybe lose speed when they were moving in reverse compared to going there head on. I feel like that was especially noticeable on heavy tanks like the Sturm Tiger. Maybe in the past this would have to like maybe adjust its positioning slightly when going in reverse and then it would lose a bit of top speed, but that seems to be solved in this patch. And similarly, it used to be when you would give like reverse commands slightly off to the side, not directly behind, the tank would like slow down quite a lot. Kind of like make the turn and then start accelerating going back there. But now, as you can see from the top speed counter down here, like you do suffer a little bit of a hitch in your speed, but it's not that much. So much smoother going in reverse now after these pathfinding changes. And they also say the stutter should be gone from rapid movement. So I think I did this demo in one of my earlier videos, maybe my start of the year wish list. But as you're trying to drive around in a circle, usually the weasel would be like, oh, 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 like, but now it's quite a lot easier to go smoothly around in a circle. Similar story if you're trying to like circle around a Stug or a casemate with your fast light vehicle. I feel like it's going to be quite a lot easier to do that now. Look at that. Just zip around. It's so much more dexterous. So I imagine these kind of zippy light vehicles that can really benefit from this kind of hot wheeling control. These fine inputs are going to be way stronger in this patch. Things like the Chaffee, the Greyhound, because as you can see, like, you can just zip around, give heaps of commands in short order, and things work as you expect them to. I was even wondering if, like, it feels almost like you're on rails when you're going around in these circles, and I was wondering if Relic kind of like looked at the path of your previous commands and then kind of like formed a line and then kind of used that to smooth out the movement. I don't know how they're doing it, but definitely feels way better on the vehicle pathfinding. There have been some big changes to squad spacing and squad formations in this patch. It used to be the case with Falchion Pies when you gave them like a right-click drag command like this. The order would be based off the model that was in the back of the squad. So you give them a right-click drag command like this, and then the order would actually be this guy would run to the spot, and then the rest of the squad would run in front of that. And the problem with that kind of input is, say if you're trying to avoid running into a machine gun or something like that, you're trying to do something that requires some fine-tune adjustment, trying to get as close as possible without running to the machine gun. Now you have to account for the extra spacing that the squad's going to fan out, which used to be even further than this, which we'll get to shortly, but it's just bad for inputs and it's confusing because it would change from squad to squad within the same faction. So yeah, that now all the inputs like this are based off the model in the front of the squad, which I think is very, very good. But they've also made changes to how far apart every model stands from each other when they're in formation. For the Falchion Pies, for instance, it used to be like this one would be here, this one would be right the way out the back. But now you can see they're probably about 3 ranged close together front to back. And it also used to be like a full-on diamond pattern for the Falchion Pies, but now they put the second model a bit closer to the front because they've made some changes with target priorities and stuff, which we'll look at shortly. But yeah, they've changed some formations, I think, to try and make target priority changes a bit more smooth and not so bad for squads that used to have really, really bad formations in the past. But yeah, just generally units are going to be close together, models within the same squad, close together, make them easier to hit with big AoE weapons. So yeah, standing out in the open is going to be a bit worse against AoE weapons now. There have also been a couple of very important changes to team weapons. Say this AT gun's getting shot at by a mortar that has a damage cap of 3. In the past, say a shell landed here, the shell would then do damage to the 3 targets that was closest to it. So the 3 targets where it would do the most damage to. So it'll be this guy here, but then also the weapon. And because the weapon is invulnerable while it's crewed, that 1/3 of the damage cap essentially just vanishes. Doesn't get damaged onto this guy in here instead. It will just go up in smoke. So it'll kind of throw off the damage values on damage cap units between infantry and team weapons because one portion of the damage cap was always just vanishing into the weapon that's invulnerable. But finally they have fixed that. So team weapons should be a lot more vulnerable to most forms of AoE. But also partially to compensate for that, they've changed it so now that team weapons should try to space themselves out a bit more when they're positioned in cover. So you can see, you know, we're kind of clumped up there, but if I drag, it feels like maybe you can see how the formation swaps from being closer to be a bit further away. I think they're trying to space the team weapon out in cover if the cover has enough positions like that, so that because now they're going to be more vulnerable to AoE, and you want to be spaced out a little bit more so they're not just going to get absolutely ruined with every shot. But definitely this overhaul could require some like health changes to team weapons because yeah, they're going to be dying to AoE much, much faster than they were before. We're having a look in the mod tools now. because as I mentioned earlier, there have been some important changes to small arms target priority. So this is the old 2.4 value for a rifleman, Garand, and there's this stat here called randomly target squad mates of best priority entity. Basically, an individual model in a rifleman squad wants to shoot at whatever the best target is as determined by this formula, which is usually like whatever is closest, whatever you're shooting at last, whichever you don't have to like turn too far to shoot at next. So yeah, there's a bunch of factors that go into it, and it determines like what is the best target, and that's what you want to shoot at. But this variable here basically introduces a dice roll. It will calculate whatever the best is, and then a roll of dice 50-50 now. You either shoot at the best one, or you'll shoot at another model that's close to the best one. So what this would do was it would kind of spread the damage around the squad. Like your squad of 6, maybe 50% of them would be shooting at the best target, and then 50% of them would be shooting at like the next best target. So the enemy squad would end up having the damage spread around it. So this would spread damage, not cause model drops, and this affected different units differently. So I made a quick spreadsheet to show you guys what this variable affected. So it never used to affect SMGs, LMGs, heavy machine guns, or ballistic weapons. So no changes to them at all. And it largely affected rifles from allied infantry. So yeah, scouts, pathfinders, riflemen, SSFs, they're non-LMG rifles, partisans. DAC, I think maybe some of these weapons might have been like copied, like maybe the scoped Panzergrenadier scoped was copied from the Tommy scoped as like a baseline and then transferred over. So maybe that's where some of the scoped rifles kind of got it for DAC. And then like all the rifles for Brits, but basically none for the Axis infantry. So this is a pretty big buff, I'd say, to allied rifle infantry. And they're going to be focusing down whichever model they think is the best and killing that one fastest. So it's probably going to change a few like small arms firefights, even though no other stats have changed in terms of like accuracy, damage, or rate of fire. Some matchups are actually going to end up playing out slightly differently after this change. There's been another important change to target priority, this one affecting infantry-held light machine guns. We're looking at the M1919 of the US Forces Paratrooper here, and it's to do with this stat, over penetration priority penalty. So basically what this does is it makes the unit want to shoot at whatever is closest to 100% chance to penetrate. So in this case, it's got let's say a penetration value of 2. So it wants to shoot at whatever target has 2 armor most. So if the target has above 2 armor, if there's 2 targets in the area, one's 4, one's 2, it always wants to shoot at the 2. Or if there's one that has 1 armor or 2, it always wants to shoot at the one that's 2 armor. So basically, high or low, it'll always converge back to trying to shoot at whatever has closest to 100% chance to penetrate. Don't want to over penetrate, you don't want to under penetrate. So that's what this stat does. And how it is affecting small arms is because the penetration tapers off at longer ranges. That means you've got a closer to 100% chance to penetrate infantry that have an armor value of 1 because they're standing further out the back. So LMG wants to shoot at the unit further at the back because it's got a closer to 100% chance to penetrate. Whereas if you shoot at the model at the front, it might be like a 250% chance to penetrate. Let's just say like that. So you don't want to shoot it. So the LMGs didn't want to shoot at the models at the front. They wanted to shoot at the models at the back. So again, it was another way of like spreading damage around the squad. So you didn't just like beam down the models at the front. But in the new version, this has just been turned off. So this is not taken into account at all anymore. So yeah, LMGs will now start shooting at models closer to the front of the squad. So yeah, models are just going to die faster overall with both of these changes. Not going to see squads running around like 6 models, 15% health nearly as often anymore. So these target priority changes are also going to impact in-cover versus out-of-cover firefights by quite a lot. Because, this model that's out of cover wants to shoot at the closest model, which is this one over here. Whereas this guy out in the open wants to shoot at this guy over here. This guy, maybe this guy in the middle, this guy over here. So the squad that's out in the open that's kind of spread out is going to spread their damage amongst the model that's clumped up in cover. Whereas these guys, maybe these three want to shoot at this model here, and these three want to shoot at this model here. So the squad that's out in the open is going to get focused down a lot faster than the squad that's in cover. So yeah, it's just another tweak that they're making in this patch to try and make sitting in cover more of an advantage. As I mentioned though about the squad formations changing, some squad formations are just atrocious for this style of gameplay. We saw it in Code 2, and the Assault Grenadier V formation is a prime example of that. It looks like they've changed the formation. They've tried to bring these two models here closer to the front. But obviously, if you're running out in the open head on with one guy right at the front, that guy's always going to get focused by everybody. He's going to die in the blink of an eye. So even though they have tweaked formations a little bit in this patch to try and mitigate some of this, I still think there are some units like Assault Grenadiers who are probably going to need some stats changes after this, like formation and target priority rework. There's been a big change to suppression in this patch, largely going back to the Code 2 style of doing things. So if you're unfamiliar up until this point in the game, in Code 3, if a unit got shot at by a suppression source like a machine gun, say if the machine gun had to stop shooting, had to like retreat, after 10 seconds, the squad would get a massive boost to its suppression recovery rate. And then it would pretty much like pop out of suppression almost immediately after 10 seconds if it wasn't getting shot at by a source of suppression. But now there's been a change. Now anything shooting at the unit will keep them in combat and stop that massive suppression recovery rate bonus from kicking in. So that's how it was in Code 2, and it kind of allows machine guns to function more as a support unit, makes them way stronger, because I think up until this point in Code 3, you get your machine gun burst off and maybe you run your pyro forwards to try nullify the suppression bonuses they got, defensive bonuses, and try kill them faster. But say your machine gun then got forced to retreat, or got like a rifle sprinted up and flanked it, got mortared off, then by the time your squad, let's say it was here, ran into close range, your machine gun ran away, then your squad's probably just going to lose once they pop out of suppression. Like, especially if you're Wehrmacht and you kind of got weak infantry, like Grenadiers and Pyres in the early game. So it didn't really allow machine guns to function that well in a support capacity. So yeah, it's a big change, going to make it way stronger, like a machine gun keeping you suppressed. So the way that this works is the unit that is suppressed has to be shot at by something to count as being in combat. It's shooting while being suppressed, that doesn't count as in combat. So eventually the suppression recovery rate will kick in, and then they'll recover. So in a situation like this, and then my machine gun has to stop firing, what you can do is you can shoot this for like 3 seconds, shoot this one for a couple seconds, shoot this one for a couple seconds, and just keep cycling between the squads, and then they will all stay suppressed just from one unit. So that's a tip for you guys. But I do have quite a few worries about this change, because up until this point they've kind of juiced machine guns up massively to try and compensate for this functionality not being in the game. And as far as I can see, they didn't really like nerf them in any areas. So I could definitely imagine machine guns overperforming in this patch after this change. On top of that, suppression abilities like this P-47 Loiter, Stuka Strafing Run, these are going to get way stronger, because after they suppress a unit, you'll be able to keep shooting at that unit and they won't recover. So these kind of abilities are going to get way better, and as far as I could see, none of them got cost increases or suppression reductions or anything like that, so that's a bit of a worry. Similar story for unit abilities that do suppression. These are going to get way stronger, and I don't think I saw any adjustments to anything like that. So overall, I do think that this is a good change. Going back to the Code 2 style, allows machine guns to function more in the support role and be more valuable even if they get forced away. But I do think maybe there needed to be more stats adjustments in other areas as a result of this. I do have another worry related to suppression. We're having a look at the numbers behind suppression. Over here is Code 3, and in this box here is Code 2. And we're specifically looking at the non-combat delay. For Code 3, it's 10 seconds, and for Code 2, it was 7 seconds. So for Code 3, the unit has to be out of combat for an extra 3 seconds before that recovery multiplier kicks in. And that might not sound like a big deal, but in the context of small arms firefights, that does make a big difference. You know, if you're trying to like flank a machine gun and keeps like resetting up and suppressing stuff and try to spread your damage around and out position, 3 seconds can make a really big difference. And same story for like those off maps and stuff, suppressing everything. An extra 3 seconds before you recover makes actually a pretty big difference. And you can see on the right column, this is the old value. COH3 used to have 7 seconds, copied over from Code 2, but they increased it up to 10 seconds because suppression just wasn't strong enough. This was like 2, maybe even longer than that, 2 years ago. But yeah, and since they made that change, they made the non-combat delay for everything in the game 10 seconds. So for your out-of-combat repairs, stealth, stuff like that, always 10 seconds. They try to make it simple like that, but I do think it could cause some problems where units have to be out of combat for too long at the moment. And again, making suppression too strong in this patch. Heavy machine gun weapon teams have had their suppression increased by a pretty sizable margin at all ranges. I want them to be able to do more damage against light vehicles, specifically like if a light vehicle is attacking them head on in like a 4v4 scenario, they want the ultralight vehicle to die a bit faster. So I want to see how this goes. I got the USF M1919 here. I'm going to just drive Crouchschützen through its arc. Can the Crouchschützen survive? Crouchschützen's pretty fast, so the tracking on this. Okay, it does take a little bit to lock on, but once it does, like you can barely even drive through the arc of a machine gun without your Crouchschützen dying. That's how fast this is going. 250 Panzerpower, no combat half tracks into the machine gun. See how it fares. So we're at a longer range here, so the machine gun's penetration should be a little bit worse. But there's a pretty handy win for the machine gun, looks like. Oh, very close. Alright, not a handy one, but close. We'll try the Dingo now. There's MG42 over here. Somewhere. There it is. So that was like one burst, and it's like 80% of the health of the Dingo gone. I don't know, man. I feel like they might have overdone it a little bit here on the penetration values. I felt like, personally, ultralights were already a little bit squeezed from the game, and I feel like this is going to squeeze them out even further. Makes me wonder if maybe the ultralights could now have like a little bit of their sight back after this, because if you accidentally drive into a machine gun, you're not going to have much time to react to get out of the arc again. So it does make me a little bit worried. But I will say that I always thought it was weird how low suppression was on machine guns in this game, and especially if you compare it to the infantry held light machine gun variants, this was like less than half of the one that Stoßtruppen hold, which didn't make any sense to me at all. And it still makes me wonder if infantry held light machine guns might be too strong at the moment, because for instance, like Stoßtruppen very often win against the Polsten, because Polsten's not very heavily armored and the LMG does so much penetration. So especially if they've got a little bit of light cover or something, they can win this fight pretty often. So things like that, or you know, maybe Palmgrens, once they pop their LMG upgrade, also has really high penetration. They would start like melting through 4x4, stuff like that. And there was like a really big power spike for DAC in the previous couple patches. We saw a very long time ago US Forces bars had their penetration decreased because they were doing so much damage against DAC light vehicles. So I wonder if maybe some of the LMGs should also, other ones, get reduced as well. But Relic have also given heavy machine guns a slight nerf in this patch to their performance against units that are positioned in cover. So now their accuracy multiplier, whether that be garrison, heavy or light, has been reduced by 0.1. So they should be hitting units in cover less often. But do note that this doesn't affect the amount of suppression they're dealing to units in cover, because suppression is largely based off the number of bullets the machine gun's spitting out. The bullets themselves don't actually have to hit the infantry to cause suppression damage. Light machine guns have been nerfed against units in cover again in this patch. So you can see the very old values out here on the right. They used to do 70% damage to units in garrison or heavy cover, but I think it was maybe 2 or 3 patches ago, it got reduced to 60% damage. And this patch now it's 50% damage, so which is basically the same as all other small arms fire. In my guide, Learn How to Capture Territory Like a Pro, we've got this nice table of the territory capture times. So you can see the pattern. Capturing takes 5 seconds longer than reverting, except for victory points, which they changed at one stage to try and make the games last a little bit longer before they went up to 575 VPs, and they never changed it back again. But Relic have decided to throw that logic in the bin, and they've made munitions points faster to capture. So now a low munitions takes 12.5 seconds to capture, but no change to the revert time. And for the high munitions, it now takes 30 seconds, which is the same as a medium, but no change to the revert time. So yeah, I can see what Relic are trying to do here. They're trying to make it more enticing to capture munitions because you can capture them faster, because at the moment, it's pretty much like a race for fuel for the first like 15 minutes of the game, and munitions kind of just on the wayside. Capture it if it's convenient for you, doesn't really matter that much. So they're trying to, get you to capture munitions a bit more importantly here and maybe draw some of the focus away from the fuel. But I think they're going about this the wrong way. I quite like the logic they had set up here, and I would prefer if they just made unit abilities cost munitions. Things like flares, rifleman sprint, just cost like 5 or 10 munitions for those kind of activations, so that if you want to get the most out of your army, you do need munitions. Whereas at the moment, you don't really need munitions. You can just spam all those abilities to your heart's content and then store up a massive bank of munitions and spam off maps in the late game. But yeah, if you had like a little bit of chip, a little bit of attrition at your munitions from using abilities throughout the course of the game, I don't think it would be as big of a problem. Mortars have received a couple of changes. They're now 20 manpower cheaper to build or 15 munitions less to upgrade, but they've had their rate of fire on their barrage nerfed slightly. So because team weapons no longer are going to have a portion of the damage absorbed by the weapon anymore, they should be way more effective against team weapons, so they've preemptively nerfed their performance on the barrage slightly, but they've also buffed its penetration, I think, against sandbags and decrew team weapons. So let's see how we go against all these targets with the barrage. So they don't look terribly good against a decrewed AT gun, if I'm honest, but still look pretty effective. Like the first 2 shells did a lot of damage to the machine gun. So I just wanted to test if I dodge on hit on the machine gun rather than on reaction to the noise, how much damage is the machine gun going to take? So even with this rate of fire, you're still pretty much guaranteed to get hit by that first 2 shells and probably take half your machine gun's health with the damage if you're reacting to the impact rather than the noise of the launch. Light artillery, that's the pack howitzer, LEIG and heavy mortar, have had a change to their scatter. Not on their auto attack, that's remaining unchanged, but on their barrage. It's been massively increased, but after every successive shot on the barrage, the scatter gets tightened and tightened and tightened by 33% each shot. So kind of hard to imagine that. Let's see how it goes. We're up against some team weapons close to the edge of their regular auto attack range, not barrage range, but with the new formations on these team weapons as well. So let's see how we get on. The heavy mortar LEIG pack alley. So that, look, that pack alley just completely missed. So did the heavy mortar. So it kind of takes like the 3rd shell before they're actually looking good. And then they are landing clean. I mean, this seems like a bit of a raw deal for the heavy mortar because its barrage seems to be shorter in terms of the number of shells. So it has less time to benefit from the tightening of scatter, and it's just got a slower, like, shell projectile time as well. Feels like it came off worse for wear there. This doesn't impact like the airburst barrage. I think that's unchanged, just like the regular barrage. Normal AT guns have had their vet requirements increased slightly and their vet 3 rate of fire reduced slightly. Alright. Casualty recovery that you get from the US med tent, for example, now only gives you 20 manpower back once the casualty gets returned instead of 25. If you had watched my guide Firing on the Move with every vehicle in COH3, then you'll know all about moving scatter. And basically, the scatter from side to side was relevant while moving, but the scatter front to back was irrelevant because they had these hard limits on it, which for the Sherman, for instance, would cause you to only scatter 6 range forwards and 6 range back. So basically, once the infantry squad was about maximum 10 range away, from 10 out to 40 range, that 6 limit either side was enforced. So it really meant that if you're chasing a squad from quite far away, you'd still land on them all the time, even while moving. So what Relic have done now is they've increased that limit. They've applied a multiplier to that hard limit, 25% moving scatter. So yeah, for the Sherman, previously it was 6, now it'll be whatever, like 7.5-ish or whatever it is. So chasing from further away is going to be worse than it was before. So you want to, if possible, with these kind of vehicles, chase to the infantry as close as possible, because otherwise your shots are going to be going a little bit more all over the place. The 25% moving distance scatter max increase was for direct fire vehicles, but for the lobber style vehicles, the ones that have slow arcing projectiles, they've got a 50% increase to moving scatter. So let's see how this goes. We're going to retreat, go for a bit of a chase down with these two, see if we can notice a difference in their performance.
We need to park it over there, man. Contact! Infantry! Beat 'em up out! Enemy infantry giving it a try!
I mean, that looked like that Sherman shell landed like really far away. What is this? That looks terrible.
Infantry! Watch for Panzerfaust!
This Sherman hasn't landed like even close to the Panzergrenadiers. Oh my goodness. Okay, that looks like it's going to matter a lot more than I was expecting it to. So let's see this in practice again. A chase down scenario, close quarters.
Get away at us!
Sherman. Yeah, I mean, look how far away that is. I feel like the Sherman wouldn't shoot it that far away in the past.
Try!
I wonder if it's also got the over penetration priority penalty, where the main gun is trying to shoot at the model that's furthest away. And because of that, like if it was shooting at this and it was scattering long, it might scatter into these guys further back, but because it's trying to shoot at the model that's furthest away, it's a pretty high chance of it just landing like miles away from the rest of the squad. There we go, that's all I can manage from day one of my coverage, because there are just so many big and impactful changes that Relic have made in this patch. I think that's quite encouraging to see that they're still willing to shake things up by so much, even though we're quite deep into COH3's life cycle right now, because I think that maybe since the start of the year, you know, there've been quite a few nice bug fixes and stuff, but the meta hasn't really been developing in a very good way since then. And it also feels like we've been waiting a long time between patches, whereas maybe in the years previous, we'd kind of get a hot fix in the middle between patches to kind of freshen things up a bit. But yeah, this will freshen things up a lot because there are so many big gameplay changes in this patch, including quite a few that I included in my Christmas wish list, at the start of the year. I think maybe like a third or so of those have been ticked off now, including the big one that team weapon crews no longer soak up a portion of a damage cap. That was such a big change. My next probably most impactful change will be hopefully machine guns can get into cover better, because that was still a problem for me last patch, but maybe with the change in spacings, it might work a little bit better this patch. Guess I'll see once I play a bit more. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled for part 2. I'll keep going through the general changes and the rest of the balance changes. We'll see how we go, but yeah, this patch is a doozy. A huge thank you to all of my Patreon backers who make creating coverage like this possible.